Hello, greetings from Poland, and thank you for inviting me to your church meeting. I feel privileged. I know that we are celebrating motherhood today. As we all know, motherhood is one of the most fascinating and beautiful experiences on earth. And speaking of motherhood, I would like to mention the fact that I have the opportunity to travel the world. And I have noticed that regardless of culture, regardless of language, place on earth, mothers resemble one another tremendously. And everywhere in the world, mothers are mothers. So I have seen Chinese mothers acting, approaching children, even my own children when they needed help, just like Polish mothers do. I have seen Palestinian mothers in Jerusalem behaving just like Polish mothers. Beautiful and amazing phenomenon of motherhood. So I would like to share some of my experience as a mother and some of my reflections on being a mother, and I hope that you will be able to relate to it. So let me begin this part by saying that one of the greatest challenges that I have faced as a mother, or I faced, maybe I should use the past tense because my first son is 24 and the younger one is 18, so they are basically young adults. Anyway, one of the greatest challenges for me as a mother is the awareness that I have not been the best mother. And I do not mean in the objective terms, because it is obvious that I have never been even near to the best possible mother on earth, but I haven't even been the best mother in subjective terms, by which I mean that I have not been the best mother I was capable of being. And honestly speaking, I cannot even say that I did everything I possibly could for my children. There were moments when I chose to pursue my professional activities. I chose to pursue my academic career. I chose to develop my church ministry. So I have always been very active and involved in something that I regarded as truly important to me. At the same time, I'm not trying to say that I neglected my children or abandoned my children, not at all. There were just moments when, first of all, I had difficulty juggling family life, home, and ministry, and job, and I had to choose. So, for example, there was a time when I chose to focus on finishing my doctoral studies when my younger son was a primary school child struggling with learning disorders. And today I keep asking myself this question: if this particular choice didn't deteriorate my son's condition. So I am not standing in front of you and just saying that we as mothers struggle with orchestrating family life and reconciling it to professional life, because it is obvious that we are. And even if we decided to quit job, it is still a great challenge to juggle all the responsibilities that being a mother and a housewife entail. But I am sharing a more painful aspect of experiencing motherhood. I mean the awareness that I did not satisfy, I did not properly, adequately respond to some of my son's deep needs. And they are both young, decent men, but they have their struggles, challenges, problems, shortages. And I keep asking myself to what extent my son's struggles, problems, flaws are my fault, or to what extent my choices, my action or inaction became the source of some of my son's struggles that they face today. Being a mother is one of the major roles we perform as women, and yet it is so extremely difficult to play this role perfectly well. Do you agree? Part of the reason is the fact that this is not the only role that we perform. The great majority of us have numerous other tasks and missions to complete and roles to play. And also all of us have our own needs and desires and dreams and aspirations and other goals in our lives. And I believe, by the way, it is perfectly okay. But as time passes by, we look back and reflect upon our past choices, past behaviors, past action or inaction, and we remember that there had been different alternatives we could choose from. And we will never know if our circumstances would have changed radically for the better, or if they would have changed radically for worse. We don't know. So we are left with this kind of questions and doubts, sometimes even regret. So I don't know about you, but I feel terribly imperfect, sometimes even guilty of some of my past choices with regard to my being a mother. But that is the way we are, I guess. Because we are just humans, imperfect, complicated, self-centered beings. That's the way humans are, both women and men. Another aspect I would like to bring to the front is our inability to satisfy all of our children's needs. So on the one hand, our maternal love brings us to the point where we want to give our children everything best we have and meet all of their needs. Because when they are born, they are so completely dependent on us, and we become alert and sensitive to their needs, to the signals that they send us, and we feel 100% responsible for satisfying their needs and willing to meet their basic needs. But as they grow, the older they get, the more complicated it becomes. And it eventually becomes impossible for us to satisfy all of their needs for different reasons. It becomes impossible for us to even notice some of their needs and struggles and problems and longings. So it all becomes more and more complicated and challenging. And yet, it does not mean that we are a failure and our maternal journey has been a failure. Quite the opposite, I believe. It is beautiful and fascinating in its imperfections and in the challenges it brings. Motherhood is like a breathtaking adventure, sometimes because of its beauty, sometimes because of its unpredictability, challenges and problems it brings. But I have come to the place where I cannot even say, God, I did everything I could. Because I am aware of the fact that I could have done more, that I could have given more, that some of my choices were not the best, the most accurate choices I could make. And then I heard a beautiful story that brought relief and hope to me. The story of Mary, my husband's mother, Marysia, that's how we called her. Mary was a very simple, hardworking, very decent and very pious, godly woman. The Bible was the only book she read. She didn't watch TV. She had basically no social life. She had no time and no energy for that. The only place she would go to, except for her work and her garden outside of town to grow vegetables and fruit for her family, so the only place she would go to was her church, Pentecostal church in Słupsk. She would take 4 of her kids, all of her kids, to church always, which was sometimes really hard on them. But she treated church and her religion very seriously. So she managed to build a spiritual foundation in her children's life and a moral spine, and she successfully inculcated biblical values in them. The simple woman who didn't even finish her primary school would keep repeating to them that without God, they are nothing. Marysia had and gave something special, though. Her boundless, infinite, endless love for her children, this spontaneous admiration and deep acceptance, as well as a very deep care for them. She would look after them and raise them in the best way she could, although she could not do much except for meeting their absolutely basic needs and being who she was. And of course, loving them. And as my husband was reflecting on his mother, he said, "My mother never helped me with homework because she didn't know how to do it. My mother never played with me because she worked so much. My mother never bought me toys because we were so poor. She wasn't even able to give me reasonable advice concerning my future. And yet, I remember that it was thanks to my mother that my home was a heaven of safety. I could hide there. My mother loved us and she was my whole world." Beautiful, isn't it? We don't need to be perfect mothers. We don't need to give them everything they need, and it will suffice to be near them and love them. I haven't been the best mother I could be, but there is one thing I know for sure. I have always loved them with all my heart, like crazy, like Mary loved her children. And that is something I am sure of. And that is something my sons have always been sure of, that I love them with all my heart. So there is hope for me and for all of us imperfect, but hopefully good enough mothers. The phenomenon of motherly love brings me to tears. Love covers everything, as the Bible says. It covers the poverty and compensates for the shortages and deficiencies. Love shines and reigns above the matters of secondary importance. And last but not least, imperfect human love, although it is truly powerful, reveals the power of the perfect love of God. All our weaknesses, deficiencies, mistakes, wrong choices, shortages as mothers and fathers create room for the perfect parent in heaven to intervene and to satisfy those needs that we were unable to satisfy. So the best thing we can do for our children is to point at the perfect parent in heaven. So even if I failed in some areas of my children's lives, I know I can point at the one who is the only one to satisfy their hearts and satisfy their souls, and initiate, hopefully, their journey with the perfect one who doesn't only love them with all of his being, but who is love. All the best to all imperfect but good enough mothers. There is hope for every single one of us. Thank you very much. God bless you, and thank you once again.